everyone to this panel discussion. I'm Lorenzo Angelini. I work for EPLO, the European Peacebuilding Liaison Office. EPLO is a network of civil society organizations based in Europe, active in the field of conflict prevention and peacebuilding. And we're very happy to be organizing this panel discussion today, which is entitled Building Peace and Protecting the Environment, Supporting the Roles of Civil Society Actors in the Middle East. As you just saw, the session takes place as part of this year's edition of the Berlin Climate and Security Conference, which is organized by Adelphi and the German Federal Foreign Office. So we will start with interventions by our two speakers before opening the floor to the audience for an interactive discussion. So feel free to ask questions, to share comments and experiences, and to engage with our speakers. I will note that the session is being recorded. It will be published on the YouTube channels of EPLO and Adelphi in the coming days. Before I introduce our two speakers, I wanted to note that unfortunately, Mariko Peters from the European External Action Service had to cancel her participation as speaker today. She will not be able to join the session due to personal reasons. So our two speakers, which we very much welcome, are Haider Ibrahimi, who is working as director of the Peace Paradigms organization. And we also have Abdelrahman Sultan, who is working as Deputy Director for EcoPeace Middle East. Many thanks again to Abdelrahman for agreeing to participate instead of your director, Yana Abu Taleb, as she was not available for the meeting. So I want to acknowledge that this means we will have only men on the panel today, for which I would like to apologize sincerely. So we will now start with the presentations from our two speakers, and after they are done, I will open the floor for questions, comments, and an interactive discussion. So Haider, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and I'm very happy to be here with you to share with you our experiences on the Iraqi context, share with you some of the major challenges that peacebuilding actors, whether national or internationals, are dealing with. Then we'll try to highlight what are the implications of climate change and environmental degradation on exacerbating the drivers of tension and conflict, and we'll wrap it up quickly with some recommendations that will enable, hopefully, the peacebuilding actors to provide better and more effective response to these issues. If we move to the next slide, please. Speaking of the Iraqi context, we are talking about more than 20 years since 2003, the US invasion and the change, the Ba'athist regime. At the time, Iraq continues to facing several challenges to peace and stability for many reasons, of course, but at the top of the list is the lack of capacity of state institutions to provide the basic public services to the citizens, issues around the neutrality and efficiency of the judiciary system, the security provisioning, etc., which led to a lot of frustrations at the community level, wide perception of marginalization and exclusion, feeling of the incapacity of the local or federal authorities to be able to live up to the expectations and requirements of the citizens. Of course, these are critical trends which open the door for extremist groups to kick in the country, because obviously the drivers of tensions and grievances have not been addressed efficiently by the government. Noting here that there was a massive support from the international community on different sectors. However, the political division, and as I said earlier, the lack of efficiency of state institutions stood as a barrier to address these issues. Almost 5 years after the Iraqi government declared the militarized victory over ISIS, but still there are wide areas still destroyed or only partially reconstructed. The security provisions stay fragmented and often detached from the interest of local communities. In the eyes of the citizens, the state institutions are becoming symbolic because the key resources and key capacities are lacking. Inability to address critical issues resulted from the large waves of displacement as a result of the violent conflict in Iraq, and post-return to address issues around reintegration, rebuilding trust relationships between and among the communities and between communities and authorities, handling the issues around community acceptance to the return of families with perceived affiliation to ISIS, which comes with a very, very wide scale of unaddressed problems. Of course, these issues will create social friction, decreased trust between and among the communities, decreased trust in the main institutions such as the security and judiciary system, and promoted for the emergence of parallel systems, such as a parallel system to the security institutions represented by the presence of the armed groups, the tribal mechanisms that are becoming competing with the judiciary system in Iraq, critical and key segments in the community, such as underrepresented groups, as minorities, persons with disabilities, women and youth, left abandoned, feeling completely isolated from decision-making, policy-making, contribution at any level. Massive scale of need, complexity, high complexity of issues that peace-building actors, among others, of course, have been dealing with over the past years. If we move to the next slide, so that we can briefly highlight what we as one of the local peace-building actors do in order to contribute to respond to these issues. Basically, we invest a lot of time and resources to highlight drivers of tension and conflict, observing context development, sharing these analysis with the larger community of practice so that they can design and implement a proper response to the issues, especially building off the knowledge that we have, the social makeup, political structures, economic, etc., which also serves as an entry point for designing local peace processes, which we apply across the country, bridging the divides between communities in different areas, helping them to take the lead in providing alternatives and localized solutions to their issues, linking them with different local authority institutions, as well as them and donor international community, so that we can create this direct linkage and direct relationship so that they can inform their policy making, decision making, and programming as well. And given the high trend in Iraq, we are talking about over 5 million IDPs as a result of the violent conflict. It's a very big issue, dealing with this caseload during displacement and post displacement. PPO is one of the local organizations that have been heavily engaged on this profile, trying to address critical issues such as stigmatization, stereotyping, radicalization, building relationships, healing relationships between communities so that they can coexist positively, recreate social bonds, and become more collaborative and cohesive. Also, one of the key priority areas we are working in over the past 2-3 years is that we are helping the institutionalization and capacity building of local peace structures, such as local peace committees, youth, voluntary groups, women, councils, etc., because they are local resources. They have a very deep understanding of the local context issues. They can find ways to address their issues and build the bridges between communities and between them, local authorities, etc. At the same time, throughout all the peace processes that we are implementing, very high level of engagement on advocacy level to make sure that peace building processes are actually inclusive, participatory, context informed, and that's basically important in Iraq because we are dealing with a lot of minorities feeling discriminated and isolated from the broader system, and also talking about women and youth lacking the voice, freedom of expression, and contribution as well, given the complexities of the issues and the social makeup, the dominant tribalism across the country. That's in a nutshell what we do as local peace building actor among others. If we move to the next slide, please, we can briefly also talk about the implications of a climate change on the existing drivers of tension and conflict at different levels. And worth mentioning here that currently we are implementing a pilot project with Adelphi and Berghoff Foundation, thanks to the support of the German Foreign Federal Office. We're implementing it in 9 districts across 5 governorates to basically try to understand what are these implications exactly, how do they affect local communities, and how do they contribute to multiply the effect of the current drivers of tension and conflict. Diversity of the locations we are operating in, from the south, center, eastern Iraq, and northern Iraq. So these are different realities, different examples that we can look into. It was clearly obvious that environmental degradation, desertification, increase of desert storms, temperatures, etc., have contributed to push entire communities to leave their areas, head towards urban cities, and here where they start to create even more frustration at the community level because they see them competing over public services, local economic opportunities, etc. It created also a lot of tribal disputes and tribal conflicts over water shares, land disputes, and there were actually examples of violent conflicts between and among the tribes, which also contributed to increase the frustration of the community that local authorities are still incapable of addressing these issues and needs, which is, of course, very, very critical at this moment in Iraq. In addition to health issues, extreme health issues, economic issues, they are different from one area to another, but broadly speaking, it has been evidently identified that these environmental factors have contributed to exacerbate drivers of tension and conflict, increase division between communities, increase isolation between communities, especially when we talk about the liberated areas where we are still dealing with reintegration issues between host communities and returnees. If we are talking about returnees from families with perceived affiliation to ISIS, this has become one of the big issues, because when they return to their areas of origin and they lack the water resources and the proper conditions for them to re-practice their farming business, for example, when they cannot do that and they are still pushed back from the host communities, not given their chance to restart again post-return, this, of course, made the task for peace-building actors and for the mediation work becomes even more challenging. One other area is that we are exploring as well is the extent to which we can address some of these existing tensions via local dialogue mechanisms, and examine how we can scale it up and replicate it in different contexts across different areas in Iraq. At the same time, creating the proper linkages with local authorities so that they can see practical examples of such issues are actually resolvable via systemic approaches. Finally, we will try to establish a platform that brings together high officials at the government level with donor international organizations so that they can establish the conversation around strategic solutions to climate change implications on peace and security in the country, which involves different aspects. This will go beyond the local context because there are grievances that water shortage in Iraq, for example, is resulting from diplomatic issues with neighboring countries. So a conversation at this level should address this type of issues that is cross borders, let's say. Even when we deal with existing conflicts and across the past years, and when we observe local organizations, civil society actors, international actors, dealing with these issues without the label of these are implications of climate change. They've been always addressed as status quo, let's say. Now it has become more trendy. We are seeing a number of international organizations are paying some efforts to assess, understand these implications, explore solutions or alternatives, trying to create a conversation with authorities so that they can maximize the workforce to address this, which is, to us peace-building actors in the country, is excellent news. Now we feel that this is going to have proper dedication, proper interest of donor communities and government to actually take further steps to addressing these issues. To sum it up with some recommendations, if we move to the next slide, please, we would briefly share these recommendations that we need to learn from the past experiences and address the issues of coordination and exchange. Because we have seen it before, there are just so many actors are working to address issues. We always face the problem of the lack of coordination and exchange. We don't necessarily know what, for example, UNDP is doing around this topic, or IOM is doing around this topic, which creates overlap and repetition and will add to the frustration of the communities at the end. It will also be confusing for authorities if they have different conversations with different actors around the same topic and they see them lacking the alignment or synergy does not exist. These are examples that we've been facing in Iraq when issues around preventing violent extremism or transitional justice issues. For example, we see different organizations providing different programs, not saying that they are bad programming, but the lack of coordination creates a lot of problems. That said, now that in Iraq, the attention to addressing climate implications on peace and security in the country, we believe that will be great if coordination platforms are established so that the alignment is created at an early stage and programming is properly directed so that it serves different purposes without duplication, without unnecessary overlapping and waste of resources or creating confusion at the community and authorities level. Second thing we would be recommending is to try to adapt holistic approaches to the extent possible. These responses, different programming to be governed by a broader strategy. We don't see it helpful or useful if a variety of organizations are tasked with different pieces of the process and they do not synergize at the end. We have seen it also before. We will lose time, we will lose efforts, and then the goals are poorly achieved 5-10 years from now. The more the response is holistic, the more it is governed by a reference. That could be a joint strategy between Iraqi government and specific, I don't know, donors or international organizations, or by providing enough technical capacity for the Iraqi government to come up with strategic priorities, strategic directions to address these issues so that they become the guiding framework for local actors to work with and organize their responses accordingly. The other thing is to invest in building the capacity of civil society actors so that their response becomes more effective and more relevant to the need. Of course, localized solutions are key to this process. People know what alternatives should work, but they don't know how to apply them. And it has been tested over the past years that when we listen to local voices and we consult with them to generate alternatives, they often work because they feel ownership and they feel more engaged. It's always the general perception at the community level that programming in Iraq is derived by external practices that does not necessarily fit in with the Iraqi context, not necessarily tailored to the local realities. So the more the process is informed by local actors, the more it fits with local realities, requirements, restrictions, conditions, etc., the more it will become feasible and measurable as well. Lastly, we would recommend that international organizations, especially the specialized ones, to try to introduce to Iraq some of the modern technologies that could help addressing environmental issues. We provide the permaculture example because we have seen it working effectively in some countries in the Arab region, and given the similarity in the I don't know, the climate conditions, we believe it should work. It will be an effective solution for local communities to find alternatives that they can cope with during this climate crisis in Iraq. I'll stop here. I'll be happy, of course, to answer any questions, provide more details. We are talking about the Iraq context. There's just a lot of issues and realities to be shared, but this is what time can allow. And again, we'll be happy to answer any questions later on. Back to you, Lorenzo.
Thanks a lot, Haider. Thanks a lot for the very insightful presentation. We'll open the floor for questions and comments after the second presentation. So I'll now give the floor to Abdelrahman Sultan. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Lorenzo, for the invite. My name is Abdelrahman Sultan. I'm the Regional Program Director at EPLO BCSC Middle East and the Deputy Director of the Jordanian Office. And I would like to share my screen. Second. Yes. I would like to speak about building peace and protecting the environment in the Middle East. And in this case, we have a special context because we have three countries, Jordan, Palestine, and Israel. And when we speak about Jordan, Palestine, and Israel, we speak about long-term conflict between the three countries and the three people that is beyond 70 years. And it has also not only a political conflict at the moment, but also some kind of cultural conflict and religious conflict that extends beyond the 70 years. So working in the Middle East, trying to create a good environment for building trust between the people and building trust to save the environment for all is quite challenging at all levels, and it needs lots of patience and to be equipped with the right tools to do so. Why water is important in the Middle East? The Middle East, as you know, it's quite a small area on a global scale, as you can see from the map, but we're very much affected by the climate change that is becoming more and more evident in the last few years. Today it's October, almost 18th, and we did not have any drop of rain this year in Jordan. So it's very, very dry. People are not very optimistic about the upcoming winter. We expected that the climate change will increase the temperature by 1.5 degree centigrade. But in the Middle East, we already have that, and we expect actually that we will have 2 more degrees in addition to the general increase of climate change. Therefore, the implication on our region is quite high. In our region, we have Jordan, where it's the second poorest water country on the globe. We have also occupation of parts of the Palestinian territories where people are deprived from water access, still depend on gallons and etc. And we have a major water issue. So we have also population growth that is exceeding all expectations. In the last years, we had also in Jordan, we had 1.8 million refugees from Syria, following the Iraqi conflict that we also had around 800,000 people from Iraq. And we have many more from Lebanon and Palestine and many other countries. So the population growth in our region is growing really rapidly, and it creates a nuisance in terms of water supply. This is something that our water managers cannot resolve at the moment. The other problem that we have in our region, which is how small we are, how fragmented we are, and how energy costs are increasing all the days, and reflected on general cost of life. So it's becoming more and more expensive to afford to live in such region with limited resources that we have. Therefore, what we see at the moment, without cooperation, what we see is a lose-lose situation where we expect that situation on a social level and environmental level continue to worsen in the coming few years. Therefore, it is very important, actually, it's vital for our survival to have what we call cooperation for surviving in this region. And the most pressing element is water. And water is very much connected to energy and food supply and other sorts of issues. I would like to speak a little bit about our region and mention how difficult also to work here. We have, as I mentioned before, we have the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And yes, we tried in 1994 to solve part of it through the Oslo agreement, but the Oslo agreement did not resolve much of what we wanted to resolve. Therefore, we have so many files, so many issues still waiting to be resolved for what we call the final stages. We at EcoPeace Middle East, we don't believe that water should wait for the final stages to be resolved. Therefore, we wanted to make sure that water is addressed at the moment at many levels to make sure that the Palestinians, Jordanian, Lebanese, Israelis have their equal share amount of water from different resources to make sure that we have the minimum of the WHO per day per capita of water supplied for domestic use, but also for other services such as agriculture and development. So this is something that needs to continue to happen. It's not easy during the continuous fast changing regimes in our region, and we have seen that how the Israeli election affected cooperation positively and negatively in the last few years. The competition over water resources, as I mentioned, is something that is common, upstream versus downstream, and that has led to complete deterioration of major important rivers such as the Jordan River, which is a holy river for more than half humanity on the globe. We know that Jordan River and Yarmouk rivers are a trickle at the moment, and the only amount of water that is flowing in the Jordan River is how you call it, bad water in terms of agricultural runoff and polluted water, etc., and very saline water. So it's very sad to see a major source of life has deteriorated that quickly in less than 50 to 70 years of our recent history. The last pandemic that happened, Corona, we all suffered from, but here the Jordanian government in Jordan decided that agriculture should be the priority, and they allowed more water to be delivered to the farmers. And because of that, they thought, the government, that this will solve food supply to the local communities. As a result, 2 years after, we have seen that most of our dams are getting empty and dry. The groundwater is deteriorating very rapidly at the moment, and sign of unsustainability becomes very, very obvious at the moment. And we have doubts if we can continue in the same pattern at the moment, or something major should happen in order to reverse the problem. So how strategic that decision was at that time, and what are the consequences that we are suffering from at the moment, this is something that needs to be addressed at the highest level of decision making in Jordan, and also in the region and globally. I mentioned before, the Arab Spring had severe consequences in our region. 1.8 million Syrian refugees came to Jordan. 1.8 million Syrian refugees need water. They need sanitation services. And at the moment, if I may say, that the international aid that came to Jordan to help those refugees to be able to pass that time or to survive, we are augmenting the problem, and we might see that in the near future that Syrian refugees in Jordan, if they did not go back to Syria, and as a result, the groundwater aquifer and the surface water aquifers are not replenished, then we might see another bad situation where we have social unrest in Jordan, and we might see that Jordanians themselves will need to leave the country because of shortage of water, and the situation will become very bad. Looking into the future, what could be the solution? EcoPeace proposed what we call the Green Blue Deal, and this is something that is looking at the region at large, trying to solve and create what we call win-win situation. The first chapter of the Green Blue Deal speaks about water energy nexus, where we believe that Jordan has the advantage, vast desert with beautiful sunshine that can be habitat for renewable energy production, PV production, and also wind production in Jordan. While on Mediterranean coast, we know that Israel is leading in desalination technology. So if the two sides cooperate on this matter, then we will provide renewable energy that is very much needed for water production and desalination. And this is something that EcoPeace is looking at, trying to say then regional cooperation might be possible in order to save this region in terms of water and energy together. Efforts to rehabilitate the Jordan River, something that needs to continue. Jordan River, as I mentioned, is in poor condition, but today the governments of Jordan, Israel, and Palestine understand the severity of the issue. We still have impediments that that will help us to move forward in terms of creating what we call a trust fund between the three countries in order to provide the needed financial resources to advance projects and solutions at the basin level, not only at the country level, because the problem is not only national, it's a regional problem. Therefore, regional cooperation is also very much needed, and EcoPeace is calling for a committee that works on the river Jordan basin, that looks at all pollution sources, trying to reduce them, and how can we improve the biodiversity, how can we improve the water distribution, and use the river as conduit of fresh water rather than canal of bad saline sewage water. The third component of the Green Blue Deal speaks about the Palestinian-Israeli water agreement. And as I mentioned, we needed to make sure that the water does not stay until the very final stage of agreement or solution. We need to make sure that Palestinian and Israelis see the need to resolve the current problems. At the moment, the current problems can be categorized in two main categories. One is One is looking at how can we increase the water supply to the Palestinian, and the second, how can we reduce pollution to all parties. So this is where we create a win-win situation for both the Palestinian and Israelis at the moment. It's not an easy task. It needs lots of scientific research, modeling, and we're using top researchers on a global level, working with the Stockholm International Environmental Institute and other important institutes in the region to resolve this matter. And everything here, again, it needs awareness, and awareness needs a top-down awareness that is reflected on the decision makers to change policies, but also on the bottom up to increase the buy-in from the local society, being gender balanced, youth, or different stakeholders at the community level. As I mentioned before, here we have the top-down initiatives, and here we would like to have a regional cooperation between the countries. The signing of the letter of intent last year between Jordan and Israel and the United Arab Emirates helped to lay a foundation for potential cooperation in the future, where we exchange water and energy between the three countries, Jordan, Palestine, and Israel, to make sure that we expand the pie of available renewable water and energy, and also working on the multiple complex files that we have in our region, which is the Jordan River and sustainability of the mountain aquifer between the Palestinian and Israelis. We produced a master plan. The master plan looks at the holistic approach. How can we resolve the Jordan River? It includes 7 thematic areas, and in each area we have a number of priority projects that needs to happen on ecological rehabilitation, on pollution control, and sustainable agriculture, sustainable water management and river rehabilitation, urban infrastructure development, tourism, and creating a governing body to make sure that we are looking at the development of the Jordan Valley in a comprehensive manner, and to make sure that we leave no sector behind. And we have seen that unilateral decisions or sudden decision will have negative environmental consequences and also social consequences that we need to resolve at greater expense in the future. I can say that we have reached almost the bottom of the curve in terms of the environmental quality in our region, and we need to think now how can we improve or change the curve to a better conditions on a national level, but also on a regional level with international support. Therefore, cooperation with large institutions such as the World Bank, European Unions, and many others will help to create a support for the process and buy-in by the different partners. This is again a replication of what needs to happen between the exchange of energy and water. And I would like to mention that the letter of intent that was signed in last year between Jordan, Israel, and United Arab Emirates did not include the Palestinians. EcoPeace wanted to include the Palestinians, and we wanted to make sure that we supply Gaza with water and with electricity. We would like to supply the Palestinian West Bank with water and electricity. So there should be projects on both sides of the Mediterranean, in Gaza and in Israel, of desalination. So we can give each of the three countries, Jordan, Palestine, and Israel, some kind of upper hand in one of the domains to supply water and energy for the other countries. In doing so, we can create what we call healthy interdependency between the people and the countries. Again, every project that we do is coupled with what we call the bottom-up, and this is where we have tons of environmental education programs that include youth, women, farmers, municipality leaders, name it. They all need to learn about their water reality. You need to learn about the adjacent neighboring country from the other country's water reality, how we affect them and how they affect us, and what can we do together in order to find solution and alleviate the existing problems. The work on the bottom up was divided in so many categories, and I mentioned here a few of them that include building understanding that saving the environment creates a win-win situation for all of us. It can come from the faith-based, for those who believe in the three different religions. That's why we have what the Quran, what the Old Testament and the New Testament speaks about the different water and how they look at rivers and streams, and that helps everyone to make sure that it's also coming from a faith. We can work a lot on creating what we call new economical opportunities that can help creating sustainability in our region, and create models in our region where they can see it, people need to witness. I can tell you for sure that most new generation in Jordan don't understand what a Jordan River used to look like, because they never had the chance to see the river, because it's a military zone, first of all. Two, the river today at its existing condition, it's a small little river, so they don't have the experience. That's why they needed to see models where they can see environmental restoration and rehabilitation, and understand that there is a new reality that they need to look forward and work for it. The takeaways that we would like to mention here, that peace in our region is not only Middle East related, but it's also European, and we need to expand the horizon of cooperation between the Middle East and Europe at this stage. We have seen the weaponization of energy. Therefore, the Middle East can also serve as an area of export of renewable energy, not only between the countries, but also across the regions, to Europe as well. And we need to solve that because we need to reduce the influx of migration from the Middle East to Europe. And that will happen if we have stable Middle East. So cooperation should come from both sides to provide their cooperation components, if I may say. We know for sure that the climate change is not only a threat multiplier, but also it's a multiplier of opportunity. So therefore, the transformation towards renewable energy and water energy would be something that we can do at the current stage, and we can emphasize or help to make sure that the technology finds its own way at faster speed to make sure that we have safe renewable energy at the moment. And renewable energy is linked very much to water. It's very much linked to food supply and stability. So we think that the nexus here is important in order to make those linkages between the four components: water, environment, energy, and agriculture. The last component probably I mentioned before, but again, cooperation with European in order to solve the issue of refugees. It has to be based on increasing awareness at the household level in our region, and how can we make sure that we are resilient towards the climate change? How can we do to adapt to the new environment that is changing rapidly? That will help both communities in the Middle East and in European countries not to stress one or the other ecosystem because of sudden influx of people. This is something that is beyond a small support here or there. It needs to be a stronger program. I remember that the European Union worked on the neighborhood policies, and here I think that it's very much needed that we expand on water, energy, sustainability component, not only from a human side, but also from, again, security side, because we can see that instability in our region can lead to larger security risks, unpleasant situation in the future. Probably I should stop here. I don't know if I have more time, but I can stop here and open the floor for questions.
Thanks a lot, Abdelrahman. Thanks a lot for a very insightful presentation as well. We will indeed now open the floor to the audience for questions, comments, for sharing experiences or insights from your own work, if you would like. I have questions myself for our two speakers, but if you would like to submit a question or to make a comment, please either raise your electronic hand or feel free to let me know in the chat that you would like to take the floor. You may also simply write a question or a comment in the chat, and I will read it for you if you would rather not take the floor using your microphone. I can already see a question from Dobroslava Victor Mac in the chat. Would you like to use your microphone, or would you prefer that I read it for you? Yes.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for both very interesting presentations. Yeah, my question is related to the Iraqi context. So I'm very much interested. Yes, I know that the civil society, the organizations, various groups and initiatives are addressing many issues, many problems, including the ecological ones. But also we know that Iraq's economy is very much dependent on oil and on oil export, and a lot of finance comes from it. And in the context now of climate change, of the need to go away from fossil fuels, is there any discussion, any debate among civil society in Iraq how to address the issue, which seems to be one of the core challenges for sustainability, for a sustainable transformation, the departing from the oil. Thank you very much.
So for that, let's take a few questions before going back to our two speakers. So I see a question from Diego Osorio. We are developing a global grassroots community of practice to connect and empower those facing these issues at the front line. How can we collaborate? So I think that's a useful question about collaboration in general across civil society organizations, across governments and authorities and civil society, and also with regard to the role that international actors, the European Union and others may play in supporting civil society. That's maybe a question for our two speakers. Any additional insights that you may have on how to support collaboration across civil society and with governments? And then I see a question from Marcelo Gerlach. I would like to ask about capacity building for civil society, especially young people. What are challenges? What are educational priorities? How to do it in a participatory manner? So again, I think a very important question about how to engage, how to address the challenges, and supporting also civil society actors, young people, diverse young people, to play their own roles in addressing those challenges, and any insights you may have will be helpful. Perhaps we can start with those three questions. Again, if others would like to ask questions or make comments, feel free to raise your hand or to ask them in the chat. We can perhaps start in reverse order. Abdelrahman, would you like to respond to some of those questions?
Yes, I can do that. Definitely. Thank you, Diego, for your question. We can definitely work on cooperation. There is a lot that we can do in order to empower our community members. It's very important that people feel that they are connected and part of larger international solidarity and movement that can help them to gain experience, to learn about new methods and approaches. And of course, there is a lot that we can do, and probably the easiest at this stage is to organize a call, and we can speak in specific what can be the lesson learned and what could be the cooperation that we can do in order to foster this kind of community engagement and learning experience. Concerning this, the last question, which is capacity building of civil society and what are the challenges, there are many challenges. Usually the level of education, the priority of young people on the ground are not really the same ones that we're trying to advocate for. So usually it's a challenge to bring people to speak about the environment, speak about water, and speak about biodiversity in this region and climate change. Therefore, we have to make the linkages very clear how the climate change impacts their lives directly, trying to create those direct linkages. It's not an easy process. It needs lots of empowerment. Therefore, we have a big program in the Middle East that we call water diplomacy. It attracts people at the age of 21 to 35, trying to teach them about all sorts of tools to help them to see how can they improve their lives and their economics as well through the learning process. So we have one project about the water diplomacy. The second one speaks about green social entrepreneur. And here what are the new projects in the field of environment, water, energy, and agriculture. How can we help those people to find new solutions, new ideas to help them to improve their lives? The key here is to make sure that young people see the effect on their lives directly and start to engage at early stage, if I may say. I'll stop here.
Thanks a lot for that. Haider, would you like to respond to some of the other points or the same ones?
Sure. Yeah, excellent questions. On the first one related to civil society participation in Iraq around the debate about sustainability and climate change effects, the participation is still limited at its very, very early stage in Iraq. Very recently, the government took the initiative to establish local bodies at the governorate level to start to analyze the issues, try to generate alternatives with the hope that they can come up with a national level strategy to address the implications of climate change. In this platform, the contribution of civil society is very, very limited, unfortunately. We anticipate that it will grow over time, but that's the thing. Here is the right moment to advocate for better engagement of civil society in this process, because obviously they are engaged in different programmings in different areas, and they have a lot of granularity and factual-based researches and analysis that can provide and help supporting decision-making and policy-making. I hope this answer is useful. On the capacity building, yes, like I said, that's a new trend in Iraq. Technical expertise are still very limited. What is practically needed at local level civil society actors is to be exposed to tools, methodologies, approaches on raising awareness, advocacy campaigns, promoting collaboration between communities and local authorities, raising awareness and how to cope with the situation. I mean, the need is very high. The consequences are very dire. We've been talking about through our presentation that entire communities are migrating to urban cities, increasing urbanization, creating a lot of competition over the distribution of public services, local economies, job opportunities, etc. So there is a lot that needs to be done. Civil society actors are not fully aware around how to do it properly, actually. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Haider, for that. Great. Again, if you have questions, comments, I know that a lot of the organizations represented in the audience do engage in the region also in relation to the dual objectives of promoting and supporting peace and protecting the environment and adapting to climate change. If you have examples from your own work that you would like to share, please feel free to do so, or questions that you may have for our speakers. I have a question to our two speakers, since we discussed very much how men and women could be affected differently by the effects of climate change and the conflict dynamics that may be exacerbated by climate change. I was wondering if you could expand a bit on some of those specific challenges that you may have identified for diverse men, for diverse women, among young people especially, and if you have any additional thoughts on how to address some of those difficulties. And I would also like to ask you, since you discussed some of the importance, important aspects of fostering collaboration, including, between the environmental protection community and the peace building community, working also with authorities that are sometimes, siloed. I was wondering if you have any additional thoughts on how the European Union and other international actors should support the connection, again, between climate and environmental expertise and peace building expertise, how to make those two fields work hand in hand. You've given good examples from the projects that you've been working on, but any additional thoughts will be welcome. I don't see any other hand or comments in the chat for now, so I'll give the floor back to Haider first, perhaps.
Absolutely. Yeah, on the collaboration and what the EU can do, I think now is, again, the right moment, because now the government is taking practical steps towards creating a strategy at a national level. And like we said, they are creating a workforce. By workforce, I mean they are creating local committees at a governorate level, comprised of members from the Ministry of Environment, heads of administrative units, in addition to subject matter experts and key civil society activists. This is an excellent makeup, properly diversified. What we are concerned about is that this governmental effort is not going to be receiving proper support from international actors, especially international organizations with relevant technical expertise, so that this strategy and its element is realistic and it speaks to the actual needs at a national level, taking into consideration the political division and security and other issues in the country. It has to be extremely cautious of conflict sensitivity and take into consideration the do no harm aspect of it. And it has to come with a proper capacity building and orientation campaign, because strategy action plan, that's fancy, it needs to be implemented. And workforce needs to be aware and have the proper tools and know-how in order to be able to implement it. What an organization like an EU can do is to organize the process. That's very key role. I don't know how it works. It could be a secretariat for this platform to make sure that is organized, solution-oriented. There is a proper follow-up mechanism, proper monitoring tools are deployed, and there are some accountability measures are put in place. And more importantly is to make sure that the integration is there. When it comes to the implementation, there is enough space for different actors working on this profile to have frequent conversation exchange that is constructive to avoid duplication or overlaps, and also to maximize the space for local civil society actors as well as community representatives to have a say in the process, either in the design or implementation or on later on stages. That's what I mean by organizing the process, not necessarily to sponsor it, but to be a key enabler for the government to organize the process. Part of this task is to provide enough technical support to relevant government offices such as Ministry of Environment, Council of Ministers, and high-level policymakers. Should I answer the other question, or I stop here?
If you have some thoughts, feel free, and then I will turn to Abdelrahman afterwards.
Yeah, on integrating the role of women and youth, that's key. In my mind, they are not two isolated topics. When we talk about building peace, protecting environment, dealing with the implications of environmental degradation, it's one package. We are addressing community grievances, bridging divides, creating common grounds between disputed communities, regardless what the reason is. Now that we are talking about water scarcity, extreme drought, desertification, these are technically related to implications of climate change. In this sphere, the contribution in a broader sense of women and youth is very, very limited. And that is very unfortunate, because big issues are addressed by tribal leaders, key community actors, mayors and sub-mayors. And that is something that started to be addressed the past few years, but the steps taken are small, let's say. It has to be maximized. There is just a lot of youth and women workforce. There is a lot of potential and motivation that they have. They just need the platform to make their voices heard. If civil society cannot provide them the safe space, then that's going to be a big problem. There are enough capacities and know-how when we talk about local civil society actors, because they have been engaged in different programmings in the past, and now they know why it is important. It's not only to satisfy the donors to maintain participation of women and youth, but now they actually acknowledge the importance of their participation. They have witnessed positive examples out of their participations. We, as an organization working on, for example, brokering peace agreements between disputed communities, we have seen it like practical examples that without the contribution of youth and women, the peace agreement has no value. It will not be sustainable. It will not be respected in terms of terms and conditions in the agreement, because they are a significant force in the community. They have a lot of motivation and positive energy to make change happen. Community leaders, elderly, have started to see the value of their contribution, but it's not everywhere. I mean, only when there is a proper peace initiative, speaking from our knowledge, because we are a peace building actor, only when there is a proper peace initiative that explains why it is important to engage women and youth, they started to change their perception and change their mindset. But in other areas, in other venues where there is no programming in place, the classical mindset is still there, that women, youth have no voice, they know nothing, they are not important, we are the elderly, we can resolve the issues of the country, which is, as everyone in this room knows, is a myth. This is not true at all. We would encourage organizations working on this profile, addressing the implications of climate change on peace and security, that engagement of women and youth sits as a top priority, because we are going to deal with a very localized level in order for us to be able to address existing issues. By excluding women and youth, our success will be in question. I'm sorry I've taken too long answering this question, and back to you, Lorenzo.
Thanks a lot, Haider. Abdelrahman, I'll turn to you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Haider. You elaborated a lot on the gender issue. I would like to add that the culture used to be in our region that not only women and youth are excluded from the process, but also civil society and many actors were not included in the past in the decision-making process. I can say that the engagement, it comes from necessity, because different target group are differently affected by the different conditions that we have in this region. And people did not believe at the beginning that they have the right to suggest solutions or to be part of the discussion. At the moment, we're trying to encourage more and more participatory approach that include everyone and exclude no one. And to surprise that more people are becoming more committed from those neglected sectors, gender in our society. So yes, we're in full agreement that women and youth should be participating at all levels, not only to discuss and express themselves, but also to take decisions, to be part of the decision-making process at all levels, not only in the consultation only. Coming back to the first question, which is the European Union and what can be done, there is a lot to be done. We understood today that the globe reacts together to different crises in different forms, and therefore the Ukrainian situation today is showing us that the war between Russia and Ukraine has an impact on every commodity in our life. It has changed everything. Therefore, the solution should be comprehensive at a larger level that include the EU and other larger entities. We believe that securing renewable energy sources could be one solution. So the production of hydrogen, green hydrogen, from the Middle East towards Europe and other regions, and the development of renewable energy sources should be the lead, and should be the research, to make it mainstream, and also implementation should be also sponsored and facilitated to large extent in this kind of energy transition. We need to make sure that the linkages between water, food, and energy should be linked directly to national security, to the regional security. So when we speak about security, we're not speaking about the military security only, but we're speaking about also providing the basic needs for the human societies. If we don't have water, if we don't have energy, then national security is at risk. Therefore, we need to make sure that security councils or security meetings are helpful. And I can mention as two examples that the German presidency invited EcoPeace twice to the United Nations Security Council to speak about water and energy in the Middle East. And that was helpful to spread the awareness about the need for more cooperation. Coming to the Berlin and other important events, I think it's important to make sure that the decision-making process in Europe understands the severity and the complexity of decisions and the implication on water, food security, etc. So the dynamic should be very clear. The availability of emergency funds and emergency intervention should be also be there. In our region, yes, it helped us at the beginning to absorb the shock of the Syrian refugees, but today it does not resolve the issue of the groundwater aquifer that is at risk. It does not look at the consequences of pollution, etc. Therefore, we have to make sure that the continuity of solving the problem is there, and the European responsibility in this is it's very clear, and we're not asking the European Union only to help. No, the European Union is part of the system, and there is a responsibility shared by all in this regard. Therefore, I think the message is clear that no one region is isolated, but the whole region should be interconnected. We believe that in the future, the Mesopotamian region, as my colleague Haider mentioned, the complex situation in Iraq is not in isolation of Iran, Syria, Turkey, etc. on water, should be expanded in terms of regional cooperation. We think that the Middle East, Mesopotamian, and European, North Africa should also in some kind of connection and in harmony when we speak about a major solution for this region. I think time is limited until another crisis comes, and we have to be well prepared. If we look at the European aid today to Ukraine, if that European aid was invested before the war in renewable energy, in water, in sustainable development practices, that could solve many problems and maybe could reduce the severity of the war at the moment. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks, Ibrahimi. I'm conscious of time, so we will go for a final round of questions or comments before giving back the floor to our two speakers for final thoughts and responses. Do not hesitate to ask a question in the chat if you would prefer doing so rather than taking the floor, but I see Lorenzo Conti's hand raised. Go ahead, Lorenzo.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting discussion as well. So, well, you touched a bit on this already, but I was just curious to hear, well, given the sensitivity and importance of access to water in general, resources, food in the Middle East, and maybe also, yeah, discussions on energy transition, to what extent this could actually be an entry point for discussion in brokering peace agreements, or in general, while holding peace talks, and in general efforts of mediation and dialogue among different groups in the region. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Lorenzo. So indeed, those issues as entry points for peace and cooperation. Perhaps I'll ask a final question before giving back the floor to you, and this is directly related to a point that you just made, Abdelrahman, about the availability of funds. Sometimes when there are investment plans that are launched for climate adaptation projects, environmental protection projects, we can see that sometimes they may also have detrimental effects on peace and conflict dynamics. And this is something that, Haider, you also touched upon when you discussed the importance of conflict sensitivity, etc. And so I was wondering, since there is an increased interest from international actors in investing in green transitions, climate adaptation, environmental protection, would you have recommendations to ensure that those investment plans are conflict sensitive? I think that I briefly saw a hand raised. If anyone else would like to take the floor, please feel free to notify me. It may have been Leo Siebert. I'll give you a final chance to raise your hand. If not, we'll go back to the speakers. All right, Haider, I'll give the floor back to you for responses and any possible last thoughts. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, on the water issues, here is the thing. We are talking about different scales of the problem. Now that we are engaged at a local level as a pilot phase, we have seen existing conflicts, tribal conflicts around, around water shares that goes into agricultural lands. And this is where we can convene to create a settlement so that the distribution becomes more balanced and resolve the issue. Speaking, yeah, it sounds easy when we talk about it, but it's very complex, very difficult process. It requires engagement of a large scale of actors. However, this is where we can have these arrangements documented and have it integrated with the local authorities, plans, priorities, and everything. There were examples where we identified that there are small solutions that require very small resources from local authorities. They are budgeted. It's just an issue of prioritization by local authorities. So that said, if enough pressure, enough lobbying and advocacy and the right conversation with the right people is established, then this will come at the top of the agenda. Solutions could be created for it, like, I don't know what the technical names for it, but there are solutions that grants access to water resources, to agricultural farms, for example, so that the people can address their issues, stay better than leave to urban cities, reconnect as local communities and tribes and everything. On a larger scale, that's a diplomatic conversation cross borders. Iraq, we know that political actors did some conversations. We know that there are political interests between Iraq and neighboring countries, not necessarily best fit with the needs of the Iraqis. That's why we always advocate for a third-party convener for these cross-border conversations. It's beyond my capacity to say if this should be a peace agreement or some sort of documented arrangement between two countries or more. But yeah, a strategic solution has to be taken. A third party has to convene this conversation. It could be EU, it could be any other distinguished organization. However, in conclusion, to ensure a proper response, we cannot take pieces of the issue. It has to be, as we said in our presentation, holistic at a national level, cross-borders conversation, at the same time finding alternatives, finding ways to address localized issues, mitigate existing tensions, prevent escalation to violence and further community divisions, etc. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Haider, for that. Abdelrahman, I'll turn to you for your final responses and thoughts.
Yes, actually, I would like to benefit from my colleague Haider points saying that we need to create what we call the local language between the different parties, that they speak the same language, the win-win situation, but in a very local sense, and trying to use what we call nature-based solution, simple solution as much as possible, decentralized at the moment. This is something that is very much needed, trying to reduce the severity of large-scale projects. But some of the solution needs large-scale level, and at the large-scale level, I think that the level of engagement should include private sector in very clear format. And the monopoly that we used to have here in the Middle East, when it comes to oil, electricity, water, etc., who runs it, who distributes it, and access to it, that should end by providing equal opportunities for as much private sector or society members in the engagement process. The other thing that is really important, which is the championship. And my colleague Haider spoke about third party, and we believe that sometimes championship from outside the region can be helpful, but we also need local champions. We encourage international and local champions, because this is where we can keep the ignite, the light still on, and make sure that local people are responding to their local needs within their local context, within their culture and values, and make sure that it's translated to the basic language that people use it in their daily life, to make sure that we have societal engagement at large, and that is the main drive for sustainability for the future. We don't have parachuting project on some societies. They don't understand it. They don't engage. They don't even comprehend the complexity of the language that it's utilized. Therefore, I think that multiple engagement level is very much needed on all levels to make sure that, again, the private sector takes the required role in fixing the environment here together with the local stakeholders.
Thanks a lot, Abdelrahman, and thanks again to our two speakers for your very insightful presentations and responses today. I'll share in the chat the links to your organization's websites in case participants are interested in knowing more about the work that you do. Feel free also to reach out to our speakers if you have questions. I would like also to thank all of you for joining us today, for listening to our speakers and engaging with us. If you would like to know more about EPLO, to follow our work and to receive invitations to future events that we will be organizing, please do feel free to visit our website and to subscribe to our newsletter. I'll share in the chat as well links to engage with us and to follow some of our work on those issues. And finally, if you would like to participate in other sessions of the Berlin Climate and Security Conference, please do feel free to register for other sessions. The digital segment of the conference is continuing, so I will share this in the chat as well right now. So you have the different links to engage and to follow the discussions. Thanks again to everyone. I wish you a lovely day, and I look forward to being in touch. Bye, everyone.